Hello and welcome to this IELTS Magazine webinar in partnership with Notify. Today's webinar will look at how to drive a proactive safety culture through near misses. Now, we sometimes look at near misses and refer to them as safety observations. Notify actually call them free learning events, and that's simply because they are free of consequence. Nobody was hurt. There are no insurance claims to pay out, no fines to pay, no management time required to investigate and report back, and crucially, no HSE fees for intervention charges. What they do is they give organisations a valuable opportunity to learn about how to make the workplace safer, identify trends in near misses, and what to do about it. Now, Notify has helped companies capture almost 1 million free learning events to date, and I'm delighted to welcome Duncan Davies from Notify. Now, today, Duncan will explain how each one is an opportunity to really unearth a nugget of learning and improve business performance from both a safety and an operational perspective. Duncan will share experiences on how to maximise engagement with employees to generate these reports in the first place and provide examples on how to use these free learning events and the data that they provide to move from a reactive to a proactive safety culture in your workplace. Now, today's webinar will last an hour. You might see on the chat box there is an opportunity to ask questions to Duncan, and about 1:45 we will move to a Q&A session where hopefully we'll be able to put as many of your questions forward to Duncan as possible. We will also have some poll questions during Duncan's presentation, so please do answer those poll questions. It will give us a really good insight into where you are in your OSH journey at the moment. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Kelly. And hello, everyone. Delighted to be with you this afternoon. I know that quite a few people have joined to get some CPD points, which I love. We're all for continuous learning and development. So thank you for coming along. I think it's worth saying I'm also here to learn as well. And a webinar like this, it's not perfect. We're not sitting opposite each other having a conversation, but my ask of everybody today is that you engage and help me learn, ask questions, post challenges, make sure that you, if you're the person that rarely asks a question in a public arena, this is a great opportunity. So please do. I was at a session recently with Matthew Syed, a brilliant writer and broadcaster, and he talked about cognitive diversity. And it really struck a chord with me, actually, that in a group this size, with as many attendees as we've got today, there are all sorts of different points of view and perspectives. So I would be delighted to hear from you on your perspective on near misses or what I call free learning events. I'll give a bit of an introduction to Notify. We are a technology business. We were founded in 2017, and really on the back of the stuff on the left here, the awful statistics from the ILO, this was back in 2016, around the number of people killed at work, one worker every 15 seconds and 151 more injured or made ill. So it's a huge human cost to getting health and safety wrong. And a friend of ours, Liam Simpson, posted, I think just today or yesterday, the HSE's new fatality stats, updated fatality stats are out. 138 people killed at work in the last year, which is horrifying and not going down. I think there's a big conundrum. And whatever your view is on near miss reporting, I would say, however clever we've tried to be with various parts of safety, we still don't seem to be able to get that fatality rate down. And I'm going to call out construction, particularly for that, because the rate of fatalities in construction has gone up quite dramatically year on year. Now, we're pretty good in the UK, but good can't mean 138 people not going back to their families and friends and loved ones. And I'll come back to that at the end, hopefully, because for me, what we're going to talk about today, what I'm going to talk about is around a way of proactively understanding risks. You've also got the cost, the economic cost to the global economy, 2.8 trillion, 4% of global GDP. And then more close to home, 3 billion is the estimated cost of ill health and injuries, work-related injuries in Great Britain. So that was the backdrop to founding Notify. We're not health and safety experts. We're technologists. We love a bit of data, and I'll make no apology for that. We're going to get into a bit of data later, but we set up with a purpose, and that was to make workers safer and healthier through simple, smart, secure technology. And we kind of came at this to start a safety revolution. We use that hashtag. Not everybody's cup of tea, but I think there are two revolutions that are relevant to everybody on this webinar today. And the first one is a technological revolution. It is much easier than ever before to do things, to collate safety data, to intervene, to support workers in not even going through the task that's dangerous. But I think there's a social revolution as well, where it isn't acceptable to hurt your employees. Your younger generation, the younger workforce, are choosing where to put their labor and spend their days. And they won't join a business that is seen as unsafe. And customers won't trade with those businesses. So I think we are seeing a genuine revolution. Now, a couple of thanks before we get cracking today. Thanks to Kelly for the kind introduction there and covering some of my spiel for today. Thanks also to Taylan, who's going to be my slide helper. So he's going to be moving us forward during the day. And also thanks to Callum and my team at Notify, who've helped put some of this together. So we're going to move on now to the next slide and the kind of theme of today, which is unlocking the power of 40 seconds. And this is a bit of my job today. I hope that everybody leaves this session with a newfound love for near-miss reporting, a new passion for it. It's a very simple thing, but I think it underpins an awful lot of proactive safety. And whether or not we think about it as safety, it's about learning, it's about failure, and it's about taking what we've learned and putting that in practice to stop something happening again. There's a fabulous book, if you get a chance to read it, by Amy Edmondson, that talks a lot about the learnings from safety. And it talks about the ways in which you can use data to understand, learn, and improve, and in quite high-risk environments. So I'm going to share a bit of an insight on that for you today and talk a bit about the data and the practicality. So I hope today isn't just theoretical. I hope you leave with some practical insights. So why 40 seconds? I hope that becomes evident as we move on. But when I was thinking about what can you do in 40 seconds, what takes 40 seconds, I'm a business person. I'm the CEO of Notify, and I know time is money, and even 40 seconds is an amount of time. So even if I can win that argument with you, you might still say, well, 40 seconds is still 40 seconds. So just for a little bit of fun, I've done a few things here from my world that I think might take more than 40 seconds. So if we move on to the first example, I got 5 of these. Have a think of your own. I'd love to see some examples of things taking more than 40 seconds. And no offense to any IT colleagues on this webinar, but there's this one where you're about to start your Teams meeting or your team meeting and your computer starts telling you need to install a critical update. Love that one. Definitely takes more than 40 seconds, and then you arrive late at your meeting. Next one is, I don't know if I use Uber a lot. I love Uber. I don't know if anyone else feels quite scammed when you're looking at your screen and it's saying trying to find you a driver, and the little cars are moving around telling you, luring you into believing that somebody's about to pick you up, but a minute later you're just rejected and consigned to walking or getting the bus, which is fine as well. So getting an Uber driver definitely can take more than 40 seconds. Next one would be, I think this is me, because I'm sure this is a great idea, but these intelligent lifts, you know, the ones where you go in and it says, what floor do you want to go to? You have to put your floor number in and then it tells you the lift that you need to go to. I don't want a lettered lift to go into. I just want to get in and press a button. That's definitely taken me more than 40 seconds to figure out in the past. Next one is, I'm a sucker for this. You go into a meeting, and sometimes if it's a bit formal and I want to be respectful, I'll get my notepad out and I'll scribble notes. Sometimes if I'm doing an internal meeting, Notify with colleagues, and I'm sharing my screen, I don't want to be sharing my notes. So I'll then maybe do them on my phone, in notes on my phone. And then sometimes I'll be sitting with my computer doing them on OneNote. And what takes me a lot longer than 40 seconds is reflecting back and thinking, which meeting was I in and where did I put those flipping notes so I can come back to them later? So that's definitely a 40-second one. And the final one is, again, this has got to be a good thing where you're trying to purchase something online and you go to the website and it says, great, you now need to check out. Then this thing pops up saying, you now need to open your banking app. So I have to go open a banking app. That needs to log me on. It needs to recognize my face. Then I have to see the amount and I have to press accept. Then I have to log out again. Then I have to go back to the website and I have to click another button. Sometimes it says declined, which is a bit of a blow, but that's a 40-second thing. All these things accumulate time, and I'm sure there's a security reason. Nobody wants to have fraud and what goes with that on their online purchases, but definitely takes longer than 40 seconds nowadays. And aren't we really, really acutely aware of how long things take now? We've got very little patience. We want things like that, click of a finger. So next slide on this is what I believe you can achieve in those 40 seconds. So don't do those things. In 40 seconds, I think you can help you and your colleagues be safe by logging a free learning event. And I just want to emphasize just 40 seconds. So it isn't a long period of time. I think people are patient enough to spend 40 seconds doing something. And that logging of a free learning event, and Kelly talked a bit about this at the front of the webinar. What do I call a free learning event? I've got a definition on this next slide for you. And it's any event that occurs in the workplace that could have caused an accident, but didn't. And there's a whole load of terminology. And an observation about safety would be, we love a terminology and we love a way of defining things. And we love a way of calling something a name. So it can be a hazard spot. It can be a near miss. It can be a safety observation. In Amy Edmondson's book that I referred to earlier, she talks about ambiguous signals. And this idea that if you get somebody to tell you something, then you're empowering them to tell you. If you make them fill in a form, if you make them prescribe a specific name to it, if it has to be defined, then you may well lose the information in the first place. And so it's really important that, for me, that we make it as obvious and as clear to a user as possible, a user being an employee or a contractor. So safety observation, hazard spot, near miss, don't mind what you call them. What are they? Well, they're free because nobody was hurt. So you haven't got somebody going to hospital. You haven't got somebody needing the first aid kit. Critically, you haven't got somebody who's not at work either for the rest of that day or for the next day. And remember that when those people are hurt, if they're hurt, that's the thing that I talked about earlier, which is impacting your brand, which is being reflected in how your customers see you, might impact how your next tender application goes. So critically, these free learning events, nobody's been hurt. Next, there are no damages. Nothing got damaged. So, nothing happened. So no equipment needs replacing. There's no cost for finding a new thing. Nothing got damaged. Next, then there's no management time required to investigate and report back. Now, we know we need to investigate accidents, and we'll come back maybe to that later. But this is critical. So getting these events costs you nothing in terms of management time. It's important to flag that there is some management time that you should want to spend on these events, because if you don't, then you will have your employees very rapidly switching off, because one of the key ways that you make this kind of reporting work is by engagement and feedback. Time and time again, I hear from organizations where there's a low level of reporting. And part of that, a big part of that, is often that people report something and then they never hear back. They don't know whether something was done about it. They don't know whether their good idea was picked up. And that lack of responsiveness can be a real deterrent, and it can very quickly switch people off. So whilst there's no management time required to investigate, you may choose, and I'll show you some ways of doing this later, you may choose to spend management time going and doing the deep learning that can come from reporting these events. Next, there are no court visits. You're not going to court. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need to ring your insurance company. Nobody's getting into big trouble because nothing happened. And finally, there are no fine for intervention costs. So on our next slide, we'll see there's no charges to pay out. There's no fine from the HSE for something that you've done that's not in line with the regulations. So incredibly low cost. And despite the fact that they're very low cost, I think many organizations still don't pick them up. And the reason I know that is I've sat in meetings with safety leaders or certainly managing directors and said, if you use this approach, if you use Notify and what we do, you will see a 10 times increase in your near miss reporting. And I've had people say, and I'm sure we've all had people say, well, why do I want more reports? That's more work. That's more things going on. And it absolutely is. There is no getting around that. If you ask people to tell you this stuff and they do, you're now in a position of knowledge. You can't unsee the report that came through. And so it is an organizational, cultural challenge that you're having to face. My argument is, though, that it's incredibly valuable to get these items, not just because of how they relate to safety, because by getting these events, you can transcend just safety for itself and move into things like operational effectiveness. If somebody's reporting a near miss or free learning event that says, this machine is making a funny noise and I think it's going to break soon, and if it breaks, that's going to cause us a potential safety hazard. That's a fabulous piece of data for the operations team to go and look at the maintenance of that particular piece of machinery. The same for finance. If there's waste happening, if there's a leak, or if there's something that's not being done in line with a process that's efficient, then fabulous for the finance function or the operations team again to understand that and take out that waste from the organization. And I think those elements often get overlooked. I think it's often seen as a safety priority to do near miss reporting, when free learning events makes it a lot more about organizational wide stuff. And why this is such an exciting area is because this is genuinely getting insight from the people who are at the front line of your organization. This is not your board sitting there saying, well, we've got these policies and everybody signed this and everybody must be doing it this way because there's a process and there's a swim lane. This is your absolute frontline employees being able to report back to you to tell you what's going on, where they are. And that means from that, building that culture, you will get some fabulous potential suggestions for improvements. You'll find somebody not following a process because the process is rubbish. You'll find somebody going round a process because it's better for the customer. You might find it's actually a safer way of going around the task. But if you create that psychological safety, a term that Amy Edmondson came up with many years ago, if you create that environment, then you create the opportunity to get these little nuggets of information straight into your inbox. And that's a massive, massive gift. Well, I talk about the innovation dividend, and that comes through this collation of these events and the assessment of what are good, useful bits of information that you can go and look at, learn from, and potentially use. So you might well find in there something which changes how the business does business and makes the business more efficient, more profitable, and safer. And this is a big part for me of the sell to the board or the business about why doing this makes a lot of economic sense. I'm sure we all agree on this call that it's a useful thing to do to capture near miss reports, and we absolutely need to. But I'm also recognizing that it's hard sometimes to sell that into the business. And I think this idea of free learning events is a great way to do that. So that power of the frontline worker, really important. The idea of feedback, really, really important, because it gets you within seconds, potentially, a frontline worker flagging something to a manager, a piece of feedback that can be really, really valuable. And we call it feedback, which is often retrospective. Sometimes it should be feed forward, I think, where we're identifying something which allows us to improve in the future. So those are my free learning events. There's a bit of emphasis on free. If we just move on to the next slide, we'll talk about other types of safety incidents. Now, these can be described as learning events, but they obviously come with a cost. And I think in a lot of the safety professionals I talk to, and I go to a lot of seminars, a lot of events, there's this huge idea of proactive safety culture. How do we become proactive? And yet, I think a lot of us are still dealing with the reactive, something has happened. I need to go and do this investigation because something's happened. And of course, there's a real tension between sitting and waiting for this event that takes time and effort and needs an investigation, needs a form, might need a riddle report, and sitting there with this data of things that haven't really happened and spending time on that. And there is a point at which you need to make that decision about, I am going to focus on these near misses so that I can try and understand if I can get ahead of the curve. So they come with a cost. You've got an injury, so somebody has been hurt. You've got everything that is associated with that. You've got property damage, so you've got cost. You've got lost time. You've got low productivity, so you've got a challenge right to the bottom line. And again, that's a sell to an organization's board is, this is not just safety, this is the business not operating. And of course, tragically, you've got the potential for a fatality. And those things, they make the news. There was one a couple of weeks ago, a large business, I'll not name them in case I get the name wrong, but a business where one of the engineers was wading through a river to try and fix an issue and got swept away. The reports that you read about the impact of those things on the family of that individual, on the friends, but on the organization, the engineers who had done the same thing previously, who'd waded across to an island in the middle of this river to try and fix this fault, all of those things happen. And that fatality can take years for the organization to work through. It can also obviously be a stimulus for people to wake up and take notice. And that's absolutely something that Free Learning Events tries to get in front of. So if we move on to our next slide. So why are free learning events so useful? Well, there are three key things I'm going to talk about those. They're very numerous. You're going to have a lot more free learning events than you are going to have real life incidents. So you get the opportunity to get a lot of data insights, a lot of ambiguous data, a lot of signals from the business to tell you what's going on that allows you to build up this comprehensive picture of risks. You've got anyone can report them. And I think I love that democracy, that if you put this in place, it doesn't matter who the individual is, they can report something. And it obviously doesn't even need to be employees. It can be contractors. It can be members of the public. It can be anybody. But what it allows is that ability to ensure the culture says safety is everybody's business. You all have an opportunity to do something about this. And they provide real information, and I'd say real time as well, done well. So free learning events provide real tangible data. It's not some theory of, well, I think this might go wrong, or I think this might happen, or I've got a view. This is something that's absolutely happened and can be analyzed and looked at. But I think more relevant to that is it's in real time. And you've got this absolutely finger on the pulse aspect of near miss or free learning events, where you can see something now, you can see over time, potentially that hazard and the near miss reports increasing. And that's your opportunity to intervene and do something about them. So if we move on, this is I think, a couple of important slides now. I want to just have these key messages landing. And this first one, I think this is about sympathizing with safety teams and safety managers. These are not teams and businesses that have masses of resource. I don't speak to any EHS leaders that tell me they've got too many people in their team, or they've got too much technology investment, or they've got too much time on their hands. That is the reality of, I think, most businesses. And therefore, what you're almost encouraging there is an organization that can only react to the accidents or injuries that are taking place. And I would argue those businesses are missing out on this huge opportunity to use free learning events to proactively focus the resource. So by doing this, by getting the analysis and the data, you have the opportunity to take a small team of people who have lots of things to do, but in a way that presents data to them in an easily understandable way, allows them to say, that is what we should do next. So we've got all these things we set in our plan for the year. We've got all these initiatives. We want to do this. We need to do that for our ISO, whatever. We've got the underlying work that needs doing. But on top of that, you overlay the free learning events, which allow that team to think that's where we need to point our resources next and go after the thing that will make the biggest difference and stop the incidents happening in the first place. And of course, if we move on to the next slide, this is also a bit of reality for employees. So according to the Health and Safety at Work Act, employees have this legal duty not to walk by. You know, they shouldn't be ignoring hazards and near-miss situations. They are supposed to be trained and competent in a way that helps them pick up and understand that these things need reporting. And I think that's a really interesting angle, because it's not the safety team that make these things happen. It's the whole organization. And I see a lot of safety teams trying to implement this and struggling because there's not buy-in. The operations team are busy. The sales team are really busy. The finance team may feel like, well, they never go out, so they don't need to report things. But equally, employees are obliged to be looking and picking up these things rather than walking by. And I think that's a really important joint collaborative part of near-miss reporting or free learning events. And from my perspective, what I'm interested in is what are the main challenges that you face when it comes to generating near-miss reports. So we're going to run a poll. I hope everybody's still with me, and I hope those messages have made some sense. I'm assuming that there'll be quite a lot of agreement in the room. But we're going to run this poll probably for about a minute, and then Alex is going to shut the poll and share the answers with you all. So what are the main challenges you face when it comes to generating near-miss reports? A disengaged workforce, lack of training, no regular reinforcement, process of reporting is too difficult or complex, a workforce that's unwilling to speak up, or the existing solution is clunky. And while that's running, we've got a minute, so I'll pad for time. I'll have a quick little drink of my tea. While that's running, I hear lots of reasons of why it doesn't happen, but we have some fabulous businesses that we work with at Notify who generate dozens and dozens and hundreds of near-miss reports. I think our largest customer at one point in terms of near-miss volume was doing 6,000 a month, 6,000 a month. You just get such rich data from that. And as Kelly said at the front end, we've gone over 1 million reports now through the Notify platform. And after we've done the poll, I'm going to show you a little bit about how to handle the data side. And while we're doing that, for anyone who's nipped out to check emails, don't forget questions in the portal as well that you've logged into to support our Q&A at the back end, and any challenges that you've got to what I'm suggesting, because I think there are plenty. You know, it's easy for me to sit here and say, we'll just go and get a near miss reported, but what is it that gets in the way of that? I'd love to learn. I'm curious to hear what people think about that. So the poll's up and running. I think we'll be probably closing it in a short second. And then Alex is going to share the results. So just bear with me. And then we're going to talk about how you can capture free learning events. So we'll hold that slide for the second while Alex scribbles some answers. So genuinely fascinated to see what comes up here. I'll tell you a little apocryphal story that I'll come to again in a bit, but I'll summarize it now. And that's about a business that I met very early on in Notify, and their method of reporting near misses was by telephone. And literally they would ring up the safety manager and they would report the near miss. He would put it on a spreadsheet. That's how that business operated. Now, when I go back to my 40-second stuff from earlier, you can imagine how much time and effort that took that organization. So we've got some results. So just to, I'm quickly scanning over these. Really interesting in terms of the workforce being unwilling to speak up. So that's really interesting. That's the highest percentage, along with a disengaged workforce. So both of those together are probably approaching 50% of our responses today. So interesting that disengagement, I think, is a kind of challenge of who owns the engagement side. Is that the health and safety team, or is that the wider organization? Maybe there's a question in there later when we come to do the Q&A. The unwilling to speak up, I'm quite surprised. I'm quite surprised, because that would suggest, perhaps, happy to be challenged, that there's a fear of a consequence. So what you often we'll talk about psychological safety. If I say something, firstly, I might get into trouble. Secondly, my mate might not like me because I've said it about my mate. Or third, my mate might get into trouble. I think that's particularly a challenge around some construction projects. So that's an interesting one. And of course, I guess it goes then back to what culturally can an organization do to ensure that people do feel willing to speak up. Where we felt that we really cracked that quite early on in Notify was we built some functionality into the software. I'm slightly ruining the punchline, but I think it's relevant to this these two great answers here. And we, in the form that someone investigating or seeing that incident responds on, and that can be a near miss, there's a little box that says feedback for reporter. So the reporter would see nothing else, but in there could be written anything. So often we would see people saying, thanks for reporting that, Steve, that's brilliant, that's helped us do X. Or almost on the job training of, you reported that as a near miss, but actually when I've looked at this, it's quite clearly an incident and an injury, and therefore it needs to be reported differently next time. And I think the beauty of that is it creates that virtuous circle of, I told you something, now I can see that you've done something with it. And equally in our technology, we had you get a little ID. So you've put a report in, here's your ID number. Now you know it's in the system. When it's resolved at the other end, you get an email saying, here's what we did about it. And there's nothing more valuable for an employee to think, you know what, I told them there was a problem. I said something, they've done something about it, because I'm inspired now to do another one. And I'm inspired to tell my mates, well, I put this report in and they did something about it. And actually I've made one of my colleagues potentially safer. That's a fabulous virtuous circle to get into. So we got to that fairly quickly when we understood that a lot of people were not hearing back from the organization. So interested in whether what we're talking about here is somebody did report a near miss and they were taken out the back and given a hard talking to. So I'm going to come back to that. By all means, stick some questions in. So how do you capture free learning events? So we're going to get a bit practical now over the next 15 minutes or so before we get to the Q&A. So I'm going to talk about two things. You'll know where my bias is going to be here, so I'm going to let you into that secret. But on the left, a piece of paper, a form, a slip, or a phone call. I talked about the phone call example earlier. There are still many, many businesses, large businesses, successful multinational businesses that still use paper-based forms or documents to do this. And that's fine if it works for them to an extent. One of the reasons I'm such a huge advocate of the right-hand side here, mobile phone, PC, laptop, tablet, I'm going to come on to something else as well, is because in order to get the value from the free learning events, you need that data in a nice structured way that allows you to analyze it very, very rapidly. Going to a spreadsheet or a load of bits of paper is not a less than 40-second job to go and understand where those challenges are, where the risks are increasing in your organization. So it's just a very, very inefficient way of doing it. I totally get that there are some organizations, in the chemical sector or in other organizations where you cannot have people walking around with mobile phones. You can't have technology where the hazards are, and you've got to work around that. And maybe a form is the right place for some organizations in certain parts of it. But I would still challenge that, because how are those people getting their pay slips now? I'd be amazed if people are still getting pay slips on a piece of paper, in which case, how are they getting that digitally? And if you can get them a pay slip digitally, you can get them on a near miss form digitally. I guarantee it. So mobile phone, PC, tablet, laptop. I also bring in here sensors, so Internet of Things. You'll have come across, you probably have Internet of Things devices at home. If you use Nest for your central heating, for example, the growing opportunity is to use sensors to log near-miss free learning events automatically, potentially without the employee even recognizing that a near-miss event has occurred. And there are other bits of tech already available. We work with an organization that feeds through CCTV cameras and allows customers to create rules that say, if somebody walks on that side of the line that you can see through this camera, then that's a near miss because they shouldn't be there. If they're not wearing the right PPE, that's a near miss. We need to capture that information. And there are now growing ways of using technology to help increase and improve the quality of that data that will help you understand where the trends are taking you. So I will always advocate the benefits of digital, of course. So if we just come on to kind of how it works, and this is back to the free learning, the absolute volume of free learning that you can achieve from an engaged workforce. And this slide kind of works left to right, really. It's fairly self-explanatory. You need engagement. You need an open way of reporting. You need no consequences of reporting. You've got to fix that. But you have many, many employees. We have organizations that have from 50 to 20,000 employees. And you've also got subcontractors and other people that can potentially report these things. You've got a whole load of data being collected there on the left. And then you've got might be your safety team in the middle there, who are able to see those reports in a way that helps them understand what the data is telling them. And that can be whatever you call them. It can be a hazard, can be a near miss, can be a positive observation. We're seeing quite a lot of our organizations, of our clients, talking about positive observations these days, which I really like. And it's a nice way to take off that it's always about the bad news, health and safety. This is about people calling out colleagues for doing a cracking job in a great way. And I think that's a really interesting move. And then on the right there, you're talking to the leadership team. And I think that's this power I talked about, where you're transferring frontline expertise all the way to your leadership team in a very small number of clicks. And again, there aren't many other ways in an organization that you can share that data in real time that rapidly. And I think when you get over to the right, you're into this insight. You're into, well, what are we going to do about it? What do we need to invest in? What is the organization going to have to change in order to manage this hazard? Do we need to change the way we do the work? Do we need to invest in new machinery? Do we need to invest in new training, etc.? And that's I think something that's quite unique in terms of the speed at which something can go from left to right. And finally, on this slide, you've got, in all of this, you've got the AI thing, and I've taken nearly 40 minutes to mention AI. But one of the reasons I believe in capturing this stuff digitally is because it needs to be organized. There is absolutely no point putting AI and machine learning on biased, dodgy data that's wrong. By having a digital way of collecting this data, you have a far greater chance of having it neat and organized. And actually, one of the biggest exciting things I think for AI is the ability to take some of these reports that come in, free learning events, and quickly analyze and understand them in a way that helps push them to the safety team or the leadership team with that extra bit of insight to them. And that's not particularly clever. We can do that today. It's not mind-blowing stuff. It's not predicting that somebody's going to have an accident. I think it's far more valuable in the short term to just get that data organized and neat. So I'm now going to go, because I'm a data geek. I did warn you up front. I've got four charts I'm going to talk you through. This is a little bit about the practical application of what I've been saying, because I didn't want to leave today with just we know we need to do free near miss reports. We know it's important to capture this stuff. We know we need to understand it, but what does it mean and why? And this talks a little bit to how we sell safety within the organization. So in this first chart, again, we're just going left to right. This is very much how I see free learning events evolving in an organization. So you will find that somebody is starting to report a particular type theme of free learning event. And then another person, and you will find that they step up. So on the far left there, you've kind of got month 1 and you're moving out to month 2, 3, and then years and so on. But then in the coloured lines that are moving across, you've got in the blue line a jump in the number of reports and then another jump. And these are your precursors. We might get into some debate about pyramids, birds and Heinrichs, and precursors and causality on near misses to incidents and fatalities. I think there's a great bit of intellectual debate to have there. I'd still come back to it. It's good info to have, so let's not worry about that. Let's just get it. But what I think is the key bit that's important to understand is those interventions. So the skill and the capability of your safety team is to say, that's interesting. That is becoming a trend. Let's go and have a look at it. Let's be curious. Let's go and investigate what's going on there. It might be a really quick fix. It might be something really, really simple, or it might necessitate something a bit more interventionist. It might be a toolbox talk. It might be some training. It might be a change of process. But this is the place where safety people are using data to rapidly understand where they go and spend their time, their limited resources and limited time. And what I see with free learning events is this stepped process of one starts to loom, it picks up pace, it becomes an issue, you intervene, you do something and it drops away. In the meantime, the next thing will pick up and start to become the next challenge and the next potential issue. And you'll jump on that and then that will fall away. And these steps will continue. Why doesn't it all go flat? Because there is no risk world. There is no risk-free environment. Organizations are changing more commonly than ever. New business lines, new territories, new offices, lots and lots of change. I talk to my team regularly about living in a VUCA world. And we do. All organizations are in a competitive world where they have to keep adapting. And that means that things change and that means that risks emerge. This is a fabulous way of seeing those risks emerging in a data set as you go along. And the critical thing is that green line as your incident frequency or accident frequency rate needs to be coming down over time as well, because we need to be doing this stuff not just for the learning, because we might pick up things that are operational about efficiency and productivity, but also because we want to drive a safer workplace. And I think that comes up on the next slide, which is a customer of ours who massively focused on free learning events. And this is what it did over 3 years to their LTIs and severity rates. And the reason I put this up, put it up 2 reasons really, is if you're not aware of how much your safety data is going to come under public scrutiny, then do start thinking about that. More and more organizations are publishing their safety data. But secondly, this is about the sell to the business. The sell to the business of we are doing things which are increasing our understanding of how our business is operating, the risks associated with it, and at the same time we are reducing either our number of LTIs or our LTI frequency or the severity rate of those accidents. And that is important. I don't think we should shy away as safety people from knowing that we have to show the business that we're able to be compliant, we can tick the boxes, we can get an IOSH, we can put forward some nice stuff, but ultimately our job is to make the organization as safe as we possibly can, not risk-free, as I said at the beginning. So this is a big communication play. This is a lot about how are we doing and what do we set our goals as achieving. And again, got some fabulous customers doing great work on this, where they're setting those goals. They are challenging themselves to understand what's going on in their organization, and they are learning. They're continually curious. The penultimate chart next. And this is just getting into some of the nitty-gritty. And this is something I talk about a lot, about storytelling through data. This is made up. There are some examples here of the types of things that people can report on. But when I go back to that 40-second stuff, this is about being able to quickly get an employee to report an event and give you the type of category that it fits under. And again, these will be specific to your organization. So this will quickly help you understand, where are these things coming from? What am I seeing out there in the business? And the ability to slice and dice this by division, by team, by site is really, really impressive, because then you can go to your business and say, this is where we've got an issue. And by the way, over here, we've got some fabulous best practice. These people are reporting loads of near misses. their incident frequency rate is reducing. These people over here, very few near misses. We need to go and have a look. That's such an easy decision to make based on great data, great digital data. So helps prompt the curiosity. And then the final of my chart slides is just about the next level of understanding. So I talk about data plus storytelling equals influence. And for me, this is then the storytelling here. This is going back to your business and saying, this is what the underlying reasons are. This is what we need to do to make a change. And you'll see the types of things that, again, in this made up data, we're identifying where there are issues, and it might be that you land on training. So we have a fabulous partner of Notify does IOSH accredited training. So a kind of world first in terms of having IOSH accredited training on a digital platform, which is Notify. So WJ Safe, and that might be a place that people turn to when they're understanding, right, it's actually a training need we've identified, or it's a different type of need, but the data helps you point to the right answer. Okay, I'm going to run through the next couple of slides and then we're going to be pretty much at the Q&A. So please, if you haven't already, get some questions rolling. I think we've got about 15 minutes. This is just some maths, really. I think it sounds like it's quite difficult to get going, especially if you feel like you've got disengaged workforce, if there's a reason that people don't want to report. I did this slide ages ago to try and sell to people how quickly they can be part of the answer. So this is just the mathematics of taking you as an individual. If you can choose to do an event, report something every week or whatever, then in less than 3 minutes of a month, you can report 4 free learning events. If there are 10 of you in your team and you're doing 1 a week, that's 40 in a month. If there's 400 in your business unit, that's 1,600 a month. And if you're in a large business of 400 people across a year, that's 19,200 free learning events. That's a fabulous amount of data. You don't need to get to 19,200, but if that's organized, if it's digital, if it's easy to get at, and you can turn it into some charts, as I just showed you very rapidly, you have such rich opportunity to make valuable change, not just to safety, but operationally and profitably as well. Okay, next slide, please. So a couple of things really, and I'm speaking here because I know we have to sell safety to the wider organizations. So why is free learning events something that all organizations should be doing? Because firstly, it helps your managers, it helps them understand the risks at whatever organization they're in. It helps with the effective use of resources. So where do we point our limited finite resource? It helps on trend tracking. And because of the element I talked about earlier about it being real time, you can spot things more quickly, so you can fix things faster. It helps the business prioritize. So it's not just about safety, it's about the overall business, where you can point at different areas, different parts of the business, different business units, and you can highlight to them that they have risks that are increasing and help them improve. And secondly, it supports safer, happier employees and contractors. And that's something that we have to come back to. That's why many of you will be in the job that you love, is because you want to make sure that people get home safe. So by gathering that feedback from employees and contractors and then analyzing the results, and they can do that in less than 40 seconds per event, then we can make meaningful change to any business. And that brings me finally to this one, which is, I guess, why it matters. So ultimately, we are here because we want people, women, men, grandfathers, grandmothers, aunts, uncles, we want them to get back to their loved ones at the end of the day. We don't want to be in the news. We don't want to have caused the suffering and face the economic consequences of getting this badly wrong. And so that I think is a wonderful way that safety people think about their role, and it's a vocation for many people. And that's why it matters collecting this data. And then on the right is your colleagues. Your colleagues are deserving of your attention. They're deserving of you looking after them and flagging these events, because it allows you to put things in place that can make the workplace safer. Now I'm going to wrap up in a second. We do have a quick poll to run. I'm just going to check with the guys that we're going to do this. Yeah. So we're just going to run this poll, I think, very quickly. And then I'm going to round up and give you a thank you. And then we're going to have 10 minutes for questioning. So questions. I'm assuming we've got some questions. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got plenty, Duncan.
Fine. Do you want to? Well, I tell you what. Then, Kelly, do you want to? We'll just let the poll run a second, and shall I say my thank yous now, and then we can get straight into Q&A.
Sounds good.
Folks, thank you massively for listening. I hope it was useful. And if you didn't make it, I'm sure there's an on-demand version of this as well. I will give Notify a plug. You'll have picked that up along the way. We are passionate about helping organizations collect this data and become more efficient and more proactive around safety. We started our safety revolution in 2017 with the world's first near-miss reporting app, free near-miss reporting app. Been used in 100 countries. We're very proud of that. So we love helping you guys do what you love doing. So my contact details will be available. Go to our website, notifytechnology.com. Plenty of great content and info there if you'd like to know more. But what I suggest we do is when we close this poll, we get straight into Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, so just while we gather those poll results, it has ended. So I'm just waiting for the results to come through, but maybe we'll just go to the first question, Duncan, and then we can... oh, no, they've come through. Okay, so the poll results responses, let's just grab those. So how likely are you to implement a digital system to help with near-miss reporting in the next 12 months? Okay, so around a third said extremely likely. About a third said likely, and then the remaining third was split between unlikely and extremely unlikely. So a good 2/3 are likely to implement this, Duncan, which is good news.
Good. Super. Right. 3 good questions?
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so Karen asks, what should a good near-miss reporting system and procedure include that will also improve safety culture?
Feedback, I guess my quickest one. So the person that puts that report in understands that they get something back, both to acknowledge it and thank them and appreciate it, and then what has been done with it to reinforce that it was of value to do it in the first place. I think that's probably quite a quick answer, but
yeah, absolutely. We've got a few to get through, so that's really good. Okay, so Jennifer asks, how do you make technological solutions work for frontline employees who may not prefer technology and have got used to pieces of paper?
I think it's a great question. I guess I would say my elderly relatives don't like technology, but they sit on Facebook and Messenger and see pictures of the grandchildren. So I think the reality of the demographic is that we have a workforce that's becoming digital, and you need to think hard about whether it's that generation of person that you're trying to invest in and nurture, or whether it's at the other end where you're probably more digitally native. There is obviously going to be a middle ground for a period where somebody might continue to not engage, but I think it's about how good the technology is to interact with. You know, you put somebody in front of an iPad these days, if they're my 90-year-old granny, they'll still figure out that's a button that does this. And they are doing that with, you know, elderly people in hospitals. So I think tech can get through those naysayers.
Yeah. Okay, so what are some of the best practices for encouraging employees to report these near misses without fear of repercussions?
Oh, I mean, that's a deep question. I mean, don't have repercussions. So, I mean, you've got to live that value. I think making sure that people are rewarded positively. So that reinforcement of, we've had 40 reports this month from this team, or this individual has reported some cracking stuff. Because if you do the kind of approach of holding up the best performers, the people that are doing a cracking job of it, I think you've got a chance of taking other people with you. But equally, as a leadership team, you can't then go and have a word with somebody who's told you something you don't like. And if that's the risk in an organization, then that's something that needs to be put on the table and talked about, I think, in reality.
So what's the difference about the Notify system compared to other similar systems? What's your USP?
We focused on engagement. So the first thing that we came to was, this needs to be very, very quick for somebody to use. and they can't pick it up and go, oh, I don't know how that works. And they can't get to the next screen and the next screen, the next screen and another button. It needs to be bang, 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 bang. Right, it's done. And that's what I mentioned before about ambiguous signals, Kelly. Like, don't overthink what you need from them at the moment that they're reporting it. Just let them report something and then go back if you need to, rather than put lots of forms and blockers and questions in the way. Just super quick, super intuitive.
Excellent. Okay, we're whizzing through these. We're fitting as many as we can. You mentioned that book by Amy Edmondson. What was the title? A few people missed that.
Yeah. Can we come back to that one? And I will tell you. It's about failing, but I didn't want to give it the wrong name. So yeah, keep going and I'll find it for you.
Perfect. A few people have asked about lagging and leading indicators. So could a free learning event be classified as a lead indicator? And how would you position that?
Absolutely, it is. It's a fundamental leading indicator. I think and I'm interested if there's any questions on this about causality, and actually does a load of near misses, are they a precursor for a bad event happening? And when you get into things like the Swiss cheese model and complex events, you'll often find that catastrophic event that happened had no precursors that people had picked up. It was a sequence of things that happened at the wrong time together that created the event. But I think in terms of, is it lagging or is it leading? It's absolutely leading because it's giving you some insight. I would just not overly categorize it as just an indicator. It is an opportunity to learn for itself rather than well, something's going to happen if we don't.
Okay, so what are your top tips for safety professionals when embedding the culture of near-miss reporting, excuse me, to be a proactive metric? Chloe says that some of her senior leaders see these reports as negative and reactive.
Yeah, again, I've seen that many times. It's a bit about the influencing part of the sell into the leadership team. So firstly, we should be doing this anyway, but if we do this and I can show you that it's had an impact, then why can't we do it? It's a bit of an ROI thing of, I think we should be capturing this because it's good for our engagement. And I think using that selling skill of the business leaders want the business to be efficient and profitable and attractive to new talent. There's some really easy stuff in there of, if we're not engaging with our workforce, if people aren't feeling safe, then we won't keep the talent we've got. We won't attract the talent. So this is the stuff you need in a progressive organization to be seen as a leader, to keep and attract the talent that you probably want.
How do you feel about anonymity? Should near-miss reporting have the opportunity for anonymity when compiling?
It's a great question. So we have both in our platform. I'm not a fan of anonymity, but you absolutely can see why an organization moving from, if you like, low trust to high trust might use that. So in our platform, you can set it up so that somebody doesn't have to give their name or their email. They can just put the report in. Now, that takes away some of the reinforcement stuff where you can go back and say, thank you for doing it. But absolutely, it can work. And we've got clients where they do anonymous reporting. And I think, and it fits that kind of culture just as well. What you need to do a bit more of is say, look, we got these reports, we did these things, it's made a real difference. We'd love to know who you are. We want to reward you. You know, we want to celebrate what you've contributed to safety in this business. So, you know, why don't you put your name in next time, because you'll be celebrated, not vilified for telling us there's a problem.
Yeah, it's about that culture again, isn't it? But also, I guess you get more valuable insights, don't you, when you know where this data has come from, in order to be able to investigate it and fix it.
Exactly. I mean, in ours, it would have the site, the location, the date, the time. There's quite a lot of data that you can put in, but absolutely, the more, the better that you know about the individual. Absolutely. I'm just going to tell you that book before we run out of time. It's Right Kind of Wrong: Why Learning to Fail Can Teach Us to Thrive. It's a fabulous book.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Let's go for, we've had lots and lots, which is great. Okay, let's talk about communicating it to the workforce. You've touched on that. So when you investigate these near misses, how and should they be communicated to the workforce, and what sort of are the benefits of that?
So depends, I guess, on the question. On an individual basis, I wouldn't necessarily have them report, not everybody needs to see every individual report, but absolutely, once they're categorized, bundled up, then there's masses of value of going back to people and saying, site A and site B are doing this. We've had this many this week. This is the kind of themes. We're going to run a toolbox talk now because what we can see is this is becoming an increasing hazard. I think that's a fabulous level of proactivity from the safety team to say, now you're telling us what's going on, we can do something about it to help. And this is what we're willing to spend our time doing, because you will absolutely get more. It becomes a very virtuous circle, after not a lot of investment.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today. So I just want to extend my thanks to Duncan again. It was a fascinating insight into how we can use near misses as free learning events to make ultimately what we're all striving for, and that is to make our workplaces safer. As Duncan mentioned earlier, this webinar will be available to watch on demand at ioshmagazine.com/webinars. And a CPD certificate will automatically be sent to attendees in the next few days. So thank you again, Duncan, and thanks to our sponsor, Notify, and to the viewers for joining us today. We look forward to welcoming you to another IOSH Magazine webinar very soon.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, everybody.